No one has told us the truth from the beginning of this operation until now. We've never had a truthful picture of what we have and have not accomplished. We've had to listen to the little Air Force 4-star stand there like an accountant reading from a spreadsheet and tell us we have attacked 7,000 targets. We have hit every target and we have been successful and we have all of the assigned tasks. That's like saying, well, the patient over here was terminal. We cut off his left leg. We patched him up, near his heart. And we're very successful, obviously. In the meantime, the patient is dead, but nobody bothers to mention that. You didn't tell us to keep the patient alive. You told us to operate. So we operated. This is stupid. This is counterproductive. This is insane. It will come to nothing. But President Trump doesn't want to suffer the humiliation of admitting that we have done all that we can do. Military force is no longer the right answer, and we're going to take a different approach. And we are going, in the meantime, to disengage our forces from the current conflict. We are going to look to other mediators who are willing to help us to negotiate a more favorable outcome than we can get on our own. That's humiliating for him. He can't do it. A great man can do it. He can't do it. This is the product of Roy Cohn. Everybody should look up Roy Cohn, who was his CN first name, Roy. That man was one of the most evil, despicable human beings on the face of the earth. And he imparted his wisdom to President Trump, and President Trump has lived by it. And one of his rules was never admitting anything, never admit defeat. Say you were successful when you weren't. Say that you're in charge when you're not. In other words, never ever behave truthfully towards anyone. Because if you admit defeat in any way, shape, or form, if you admit that you weren't able to accomplish something, the rest of the world will destroy you. That's his philosophy. His philosophy is straight from Cohn. And that's why we're not going to see any change.
But the problem with that is, though, you can't sustain this. You can't sustain it in the Gulf. You can't sustain it with our air power. And more importantly, and we're going to get to this in a minute with the economic impacts of all this, we can't sustain it with our economy, the process of gas, and all the things that go on along with that. So something is going to have to give here, and we really can't talk about this portion without talking about the elephant in the room, and that is the Israel side. We showed a sound Benjamin Netanyahu, I think on Monday, openly declaring that he got a report from J.D. Vance while he was involved with these negotiations, and that he said he gets daily briefings from the national security folks in the White House. So, I mean, by all accounts, he's the one who's calling the shots here. And President Trump, and I just cannot for the life of me understand why he allowed, first of all, even before this started, with the agreement that he got for the ceasefire negotiated by the Pakistanis, who said that CEs and 11 was absolutely non-negotiable part of it, which of course the Israelis to today still continue to violate it to make sure that everybody knows that it's not President Trump that's in charge, but it's in Benjamin. If he didn't want to cease fire, he won't. Do we go from here if maintains power over our...
First, I would urge everyone to go back and watch the portion of the Republican National Convention before the election in 2024, where an Israeli flag, an enormous Israel flag, was plastered on the wall behind the speakers. And there was a sign that said Israel first. And a representative from AIPAC, or one of those organizations, and said, is first. And that's what we want. And the crowd was kind of confused. Some people sat, what is this there? The occasionals. And then there was kind of a stunned silence. You have to take people at their word. You have to pay attention to what people do. So we should have gotten the message right then and there that we are headed into a new kind of American administration, one that treats Israel and its interest and the interest of its agents in the United States as preeminent, as essentially supreme and superior to all other interests of the United States. Do this by insisting that the interest of the Israelis and their agents in the United States and dominance of the Middle East to establish their supremacy, that interest is identical to our own. Well, we all know that's not true, but not very many people took that seriously. So that's the first part. The second part is that at some point, since President Trump is turning out to be unsuccessful in achieving all of the objectives that he was assigned by the Israel lobby and its agents in the United States as billionaires, it may turn out that President Trump is more of a liability than an asset. If he can't get it done and he can't bring down Iran, if he can't destroy this state, well, then I guess we have to move on to someone else. And I think that could happen because the Khan, remember, is, with very few exceptions, just as much beholden to the Israel lobby and its donors as it is to anything else. So you don't see or listen to or hear very many objections from people on the Hill to what President Trump is doing. Attacking for anything you can think of, for being a member of the Epstein class, for declaring bankruptcy 6 times in his life, whatever. The bottom line is they're not objecting to this because they've been paid to be silent and go along. But if the Zist billionaires tell their friends on the Hill that it's time for a change, then I suspect we could see J.D. Vance in it. The problem with J.D. Vance, of course, is not changing. You're still dealing with someone who is very much in the grip of the lobby and the Z billionaires. Now, perhaps if he gets there, he could prove us wrong. But there's not much evidence right now to suggest that he isn't, because remember, you could not join this administration. You could not be on the ticket. You could not be part of the cabinet unless you signed on for Israel first. When you have a system that you set up, that doesn't mean that you have to pass muster with President Trump, but you have someone like Larry Ellison determining whether or not someone should or should not be Secretary of State, Secretary of, Defense. We call it war now and World War I nostalgia, or any of the other key cabinet posts. You know that you've lost control of your government. This is no longer an American government. It belongs to the people with the money who are Israel firsts. What are you doing with a White House chief of staff, who is actually on a campaign advisor in Israel for Netanyahu, or this very strange stuff? There was a time in this country when people were very, very sensitive to foreign influence. One of the reasons that we set up the Constitution the way we did and stipulated that someone had to be born in the United States, could not be born on foreign soil and become president of the United States, was because of Alexander Hamilton. People didn't trust him because they knew that he was privately very pro-British. We just fought a revolution to dislodge the Brits, to divorce ourselves from the British Empire. Why would we want a man like Alexander Hamilton in the presidency? This is something that's not entirely new, but it really is new in the sense that the government is not in the hands of Americans, acting exclusively, primarily in the interests of the United States and the American people.
Well, and let's look at the ramifications of what you described. I mean, anyone who's willing to look honestly can't possibly come to any other conclusion, because just based on the actions, I mean, you can even just keep it narrowly from these negotiations in. There was a great chance for President Trump to get some kind of face-saving deal in Islamabad. The Iranian side was willing to cooperate with them. As long as some things they wanted, we threw that in the trash. And one has to ask the question, why? I think you just answered it. Now we have to look at the ramifications of that. And there's a lot of financial implications of that. Let me just take a look at a couple. You've mentioned both in Asia and in Europe. Here's one from Asia. This is from the Korea and Dajun Daily. They're already warning about that they may have to expand vehicle rationing to private sector if fuel prices continues to rise. And this was 2 weeks ago. So the situation continues to get worse there. And as you were telling actually Gary now this morning, there's some issues going on in Ireland too, towards already rising to some really big issues with these fuel costs. And there's a lot of protests going on.
Well, I think it's very important to watch what's happening in Ireland. I would say that if you're a European or an American, Ireland is the canary, the mine. Now, why do I say or American? There are people in the United States who don't understand that oil is a fungible commodity. that simply because we have a great deal of oil in the United States, that the price of oil will remain low. That's not true. And if this goes forward, as I think it will, to a failure of ceasefire and eventual renewal of the war on Iran, I think what you're going to see is a precipitous rise in fuel prices here in the United States. Sims and diesel is a huge problem, not just in Ireland, but across Europe, because they have a particular type of diesel that is being mandated by the European Union that depends very heavily on UEA. And that particular component is something that comes out of the Persian Gulf in great quantities. If you can't get it, then you have to use regular diesel. But the problem is all the trucks are fitted with catalytic converters designed to use fuel that is based on URA. Now, I encourage everybody watching this, go look this up. But if you're an Irishman and you own a truck and your living dependence depends upon the use of that truck to deliver goods for you to be paid, and you can't drive it, that's it. That's the end. You lose everything. You have no income. I don't know if you have a mortgage on your house or not, but you still have to pay someone to rent a place. So suddenly you can't rent anything. Anything else matters at this point. Then the next thing that you begin to feel the pinch from is the absence of all the foodstuffs that you would normally receive, because those foodstuffs are not arriving in the same quality that they once did. In other words, the supply chains you're accustomed to begin to break down. Now, Ireland is a very good place to watch because it's small. Things happen there and their repercussions are felt everywhere far more quickly. And to all of this must be added something else. And this is something else that we discussed in the past, I think. They have an enormous number of foreigners in the country that the vast majority of the Irish do not want in the country, do not like in the country, and would like to expel. Now suddenly you have these foreigners who are competing for the same things the Irish population wants and needs, which leads you as an Irishman to say, wait a minute, who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing here? You're from a country 5,000, 6,000, 2,000 away, and you act as though you own it, that you have a right to be in my country. That's when things get very ugly. That's when internal unrest races are out of control. And at some point, Irish soldiers and Irish policemen who are trying to maintain order are going to have to make a decision. Whom do I protect? On whose side do I stand? Do I stand with the is what I am going to do? He knew that if he didn't get them out of the United States, they could become objects of violence. In other words, they could be the recipients of what I just described potentially happening in Ireland. I think it's already begun. And he didn't want to see that. So he said, send them home. When things get better, they want to come back legally, we can make that work. But right now, we can't tolerate this. Americans need those jobs. So watch Ireland. Watch carefully across all of the sectors of that country. That's the microism. You're going to see it happen eventually in France, in Germany, in the North European countries, especially in Italy, Spain. All of these countries are dealing with huge numbers of people inside the country who are not native to the country. They are not indigenous. They are, in most cases, not even citizens. This is a big problem. So let's watch and see what happens there, because at some point when things get tight here, we're going to see something similar here in the United States. Last point here.
Sure.
Everyone listening to this, like you and I, we have all lived in a period of unequaled abundance. We grew up in a world where there was abundance of everything. Abundance of food, abundance of heat, abundance of housing. That's changing. We're moving from abundance to scarcity. We've only just started. It's going to get... How are we going to deal with that? And I think that's what President Trump is thinking about. Not Iran and not Israel's national security interest, whatever they may be. Israel is going to have to take care of Israel's interests. We have to take care of ours. And we, like the Europeans, need to get quickly out of this war, put it into it, and try to restore Norsuk as quickly as possible. If he cannot do that, if he can't bring himself to do that, then he should resign and let someone else come in to do it, because that's what we need right now.
Well, I certainly couldn't argue any of that because, I mean, just the contours are all over us. We just talked about them. I mean, we can't sustain our missile fire. We didn't even talk about that today, but, you know, with our interceptor missiles, the PAC-3s, the AS, with our offensive missiles, the Jazz and the Tomahawks, and just wear terror on our aircraft. I mean, you just can't do that for an extended period of time. And the same thing on the ship crews, et cetera. But then we can't break it because the geography of Iran and the way the state is set up, all those things you just mentioned there, all these are unsustainable. And yet, instead of coming to the conclusion, you just talked about the only thing that makes any rational sense, we're keep going down this other path here that's unsustainable and unattainable. And I just can't see how it's going to have any end other than some bad end that you're talking about here, because wishful thinking and spin won't last when you hit that harsh reality you just described. Where do you see this going here from now? I mean, how much longer can this fiction last at the administration level?
Well, given the complacency in Washington, and you see some of it on Wall Street, people on Wall Street don't understand what's going on. They have no idea. They think that what we've witnessed in the oil markets, the petroleum markets, are anomalies. This is not a new permanent condition. So they don't understand this transition from abundance to scarcity. Eventually they'll figure it out. And eventually you'll see the stock market crash as confidence dissipates. And it's really enduring confidence in the government, in the president, that is sort of keeping the enemy at the gates, at least in a Odori sense, because President Trump comes on and says, oh, I don't think this will last too much longer. This should be over in a few days, or this should be over in a week or two. Certainly by the end of April. I've got news for you. If you're going to end this thing, you're going to have to do it, Mr. President, because everybody else isn't going to cry. Uncle, forget it. Iran is there to stay. You picked a core civilizational state with 93 million people. They will not surrender. Nor should they, and nor should we be attacking them. So let's get the hell out of this right now. It's not where we should be. He needs to do that. But again, Royce's rules for life that he adopted make that an impossibility. So if he can't do it, then somebody else has to step up and do it, because the entire global energy system and the supporting economies are all at high risk of destruction if he doesn't stop.
And, you know, you just said it there that President Trump keeps saying, oh, you know, it'll be over by the end of the month or whatever. And you see, based on his words here, this is the price of, it's now gone down below $100. It's continued on the words that he said here. You saw that headline that Gary just showed you about, you know, the bank saying, yeah, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. We're resilient. It's not going to be a problem. And that makes people think, oh, okay, cool. And then they'll listen to Jack Keane. They'll listen to Lindsey Graham. They'll listen to Mike Pompeo. And then they're not going to be concerned about anything. But I mean, in a certain sense, I think you can argue that these positive headlines here are actually dangerous for us and are going to lead us into the very areas of make it more likely we get into this era of scarcity that you just described, as opposed to less likely.
They maintain the illusion. And as long as the optics are good, President Trump is happy, but the optics are not going to get you through this. We're in real trouble right now. It reminds me again of Thomas Mellon. And what was he doing at the time? All the markets. And here was the Secretary of the Treasury. He was doing that, telling everyone to relax. Things are just fine. They're not. And I'm telling everybody the same thing right now. Only we see. I still hope that President Trump will see himself as first and foremost the President of the United States and recognize that he has his obligation to shelter, to protect, and feed the United States and its people first.
let's certainly hope that because the alternative is pretty dark, and I hope we don't have to find out. I'd hate to see the Ireland microcosm turn into our bigger problem here, but I think that's out there if we don't lead some of your warnings here.